Imagine working a full shift, wearing your name tag, doing everything right, and still being treated like a threat. That's what happened to Terence. And what followed left an entire town shaken. Terence Jalen Morris was ready to get off his feet. It was a long day. He'd clocked in at 2:45 p.m., worked through rush hour, filled prescriptions, explained insurance coverage to 2 different elderly customers who'd mixed up their Medicare cards, and dealt with one man who loudly insisted his expired coupon should still count. He hadn't even taken a real lunch break, just grabbed a granola bar and a bottle of water between customers. Now it was 10:17 p.m. The air outside the CVS in Rock Hill, South Carolina was thick and sticky, humid. The kind of night where even standing still made your shirt cling to your back. Terence leaned back on the concrete bench by the front entrance, just past the soda vending machine. He was still wearing his red CVS polo and black khakis, name tag front and center. His phone buzzed. The Lyft driver, Marlon, was 5 minutes away. Terence exhaled slowly and stretched his legs out. He didn't smoke. Never had. But this was one of those moments where he understood why people did. He texted his roommate. "Shift over. Lyft almost here." The reply came quickly. "Get here quick. Playoffs in 15. Terence chuckled. He'd been looking forward to kicking back on the couch with a cold drink, watching the Lakers try not to blow another fourth quarter. That was the plan. Just 5 more minutes. He tilted his head back and closed his eyes, just for a second. "Hey, you! What are you doing here?" Terence opened his eyes slowly. 2 white police officers were standing just in front of him. One had his hand resting on his duty belt. The other was already scanning the area behind him like he was expecting backup. Terence sat up straight, alert but polite. "Just waiting on my ride. I work here." He gestured toward the store. "I just got off." The taller officer narrowed his eyes. "You got ID on you?" Terence nodded, reaching slowly for his wallet. "Yeah, sure. It's in my pocket." He handed over his driver's license and pointed at his chest. "And here's my name tag. Been here over 3 years. Ask anyone inside." The shorter officer looked him over, glanced at the ID, and then exchanged a look with his partner. "We got a call," the tall one said. "Said someone was loitering outside the store, acting suspicious." Terence blinked. I'm just sitting, waiting for my lift." The officer's eyes flicked to the phone in Terence's hand, then back to his face. "You match the description." A flicker of confusion crossed Terence's face. "What description?" Neither officer answered. The taller one stepped closer. "Mind standing up for us?" Terence hesitated. "Why? I haven't done anything. I work here, man. Sir, we're not going to ask again," the other officer snapped. His hand was on his cuffs now. "Stand up." Terence's heart was beating faster, but he stayed calm. He stood up slowly, both hands visible. "Can we please go ask the store manager or someone inside? I'm just trying to get home. Turn around, hands behind your back." The cuffs clicked shut. Just like that, the Friday night changed. From tired to tense, from routine to something else entirely. Terence looked around. A young couple exiting the store had stopped mid-step. One of the cashiers, Tiffany, the college kid who always wore glittery eyeshadow, stood frozen near the door, a brown paper bag in her hand. "Ma'am, back inside!" one officer barked. Tiffany stepped backward, her mouth slightly open. Terence's voice stayed even. "This is a mistake." But it didn't matter. He hadn't moved. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't broken any rule. But now his wrists were locked behind his back, and 2 cops were holding him like he was a problem. Something was building, but the real shock hadn't even started yet. Terence wasn't shouting. He wasn't resisting. He was just standing there, wrists cuffed behind his back, trying to stay composed while the scene around him shifted from confusion to quiet disbelief. The shorter officer, Officer Brent Hollow, was holding Terence's ID and squinting at it under the overhead lights. The taller one, Officer Markley, had taken a step back and was now scanning the parking lot like he expected something to jump out at him. Terence looked over his shoulder, still calm but frustrated. "Can you please tell me exactly what the call said?" Hollow ignored the question. "We'll get to that," he mumbled. "You said I matched a description. What was it?" Terence asked again, louder this time. Markley answered without looking at him. Black male, red shirt, hanging around near the entrance. Terrence's mouth dropped slightly open. So, I work here, in a red CVS shirt. After closing, sitting on a bench where employees take their breaks. He paused, trying to collect his thoughts. That's your description? Sir, we don't make the reports. We respond to them. Hollow snapped. At that moment, the automatic doors of the CVS slid open behind them. Mr. Denton, the assistant manager, stepped out holding a clipboard and a receipt bag. He froze mid-step when he saw Terrence in cuffs. What the hell's going on out here? Denton said. Markley turned slightly. We're conducting an investigation. Please step back, sir. Denton didn't move. He works here. That may be, Hollow said, shifting slightly. But we got a report of suspicious activity matching his description. He closed the store with me. He clocked out 10 minutes ago. He's waiting for his lift. What part of that is suspicious? The officers exchanged another glance. Markley cleared his throat. We'll verify everything, sir. Just need a few minutes. No. You verify before putting someone in cuffs. Denton snapped, stepping forward now. This man hasn't done anything. Terrence turned toward Denton and gave him a tight, appreciative smile. Thanks, man. Officer Hollow walked over, pulling out his radio. Dispatch. Can you confirm? Subject identified as Terrence Morris. Date of birth 10/3/94. Employed at this CVS. Confirmed on site. They waited. The silence was sharp now. Tense. A few customers were lingering by their cars. Some were filming. One woman, mid-40s, holding a pack of toilet paper, had her phone up and pointed straight at the scene. Terrence looked toward her, unsure if he felt comforted or exposed. Denton crossed his arms. This is going to be a problem for y'all. Hollow ignored him. Waiting on confirmation, he muttered. Markley was pacing now, clearly uncomfortable. Then something shifted. A car pulled into the lot. A silver Toyota Corolla with a lift sticker in the window. The headlights illuminated the scene like a stage. The driver, a middle-aged man with a salt and pepper beard, rolled down the window. Terrence? That's me, Terrence called, raising his cuffed wrists. The driver blinked. You good, man? Terrence managed a half-smile. Apparently not. The lift driver frowned and looked at the officers. He's my pickup. He works here. I pick him up a few times a week. Markley's jaw clenched. We're clearing things up. Hollow walked back over, visibly annoyed. Dispatch confirmed he's on the employee roster. Been working here since 2020. There was a beat. Then another. Then, finally, Markley reached down and unlocked the cuffs. You're free to go, he said, his voice stiff. Terrence rubbed his wrists, which were already red. You're not going to say anything else? Markley avoided eye contact. Just doing our job. Terrence's voice cracked just a bit, not from anger, but from the kind of exhaustion that's deeper than physical. You think that's what this was? Markley didn't answer. Hollow had already walked away toward their cruiser. Terrence picked up his backpack from the bench and turned toward Denton. You good? Denton asked quietly. Terrence nodded. Yeah. No. But I'll figure it out. He opened the door to the back of the lift and sat down. As the car pulled out of the parking lot, he looked back and saw Hollow watching him from the cruiser. Neither officer had said the word sorry. Not once. But the people who saw it? The ones with their phones out? They had plenty to say. And by morning, so would everyone else. By the time Terrence got home, the playoff game had already started. His roommate Calvin was on the couch, nursing a beer and shouting at the TV. Bro, where you been? LeBron just dropped. Then he saw Terrence's face. What happened? Calvin sat up, remote in hand. You good? Terrence didn't speak at first. He dropped his bag, sat on the armrest, and rubbed the marks on his wrists. The skin was still raw. Cops cuffed me outside CVS, he finally said. Said I was loitering. Calvin blinked. Wait, what? They said someone called it in, said I matched a description. You had your name tag on? Yep. Uniform? Yep. Calvin ran a hand over his head. Nah, man, that's messed up. They didn't ask me anything. Just told me to stand up, turn around. Didn't even bother checking inside until Mr. Denton came out. Terrence leaned forward, elbows on his knees. And then the lift driver showed up. Calvin let out a low whistle. Did they at least apologize? Terence gave him a look. Right, Calvin muttered. They sat in silence for a moment, the sound of sneakers squeaking on the hardwood court playing quietly in the background. Then Calvin pulled out his phone. Wait, is this it? He held up a video from Facebook. The thumbnail showed 2 officers in front of the CVS sign, with Terence standing between them in cuffs. Terence stared at the screen. Already? It's got like 700 shares, Calvin said, scrolling. People in the comments are pissed. Terence took the phone and watched. It was shaky, filmed from a parked car. The woman filming had a soft southern accent. He's just waiting. That boy works there. I've seen him a dozen times. This is wrong. This is straight up wrong. There was a pause in the footage. Then she added quietly, They didn't even ask him nothing. Just walked up and cuffed him. Terence handed the phone back. That's me, he said. On the internet. He stood up and walked into the kitchen, grabbed a cold bottle of water, and leaned on the counter. He didn't cry. He didn't yell. He just stood there and stared at nothing in particular. Calvin spoke gently from the living room. You want to talk about it? I don't even know what to say. You gonna post about it? Terence didn't answer. He was thinking. Later that night, around 2 a.m., he finally opened Instagram and typed out a post. I've worked at the same CVS for 3 years. Tonight I sat outside after closing to wait for my lift, in uniform, with my name tag on. 2 officers rolled up, didn't ask a single question, just said I fit a description. I was cuffed in front of my co-workers and customers. They never said sorry. I'm okay. Just tired. He stared at it for a minute before hitting share. By sunrise, the post had over 3,000 likes. Comments came pouring in. People from Rock Hill, from neighboring towns, from out of state. Some were shocked. Some were furious. Some were not surprised at all. By noon, a local news station had reached out asking for a statement. Terence didn't respond right away. He hadn't even told his mom yet. But CVS corporate had already seen the video. He found out through a district manager email sent to all staff across the region. We are aware of an incident involving one of our employees outside a CVS location. We take matters of employee safety and community relations seriously, and we are reviewing all available information. We are committed to supporting our team members. No mention of his name. No specifics. Terence's phone buzzed again. Another message request. Then another and another. He clicked open one from someone he didn't know. A woman named Adrian from California. I saw your post. I don't know you, but I want you to know what happened to you was wrong. Don't let them shut you up. There was something about the way she phrased it, not preachy, just human, that made him pause. Then his phone buzzed again. This time it was Mr. Denton. Call me when you can. Some media are at the store. I think this is bigger than we thought. Terence didn't know it yet, but the footage had crossed state lines, and his name was about to become part of something far bigger than a bench outside a pharmacy. Outside the CVS, the air was hotter than usual for early spring, but that didn't stop the crowd. It started with 1 or 2 reporters near the sliding glass doors, politely asking customers if they saw anything unusual on Friday night. By the next afternoon, there were camera crews setting up across the parking lot, angled just right to catch the CVS logo in the background. Local news was parked along the curb. Then came the bigger ones, out-of-town media outlets who'd picked up the story after the video made rounds on Twitter and TikTok. Terence hadn't gone back to work since that night. Mr. Denton had called to say he could take as much paid time off as needed, at least for now. It was the most the store could do. Unofficial compassion without official liability. But something inside Terence felt unsettled. He couldn't stop thinking about Tiffany, the cashier who stood there frozen while he got cuffed, or the woman in the parking lot who filmed it all, or the Lyft driver who'd only meant to pick him up and got caught in the middle of something uglier. And then there was the part that kept playing in his head on repeat. That moment when he said, I work here, and they looked at him like it didn't matter. 3 words that didn't buy him anything. Not even a second thought. On Sunday afternoon, he finally answered a call from a reporter named Jason Alvarez. The guy was from a Charlotte station, polite, patient, and genuinely curious. "I don't want to misrepresent anything," Jason said. "But people are asking questions. Would you be open to talking on camera?" Terrence hesitated. Jason added, "We'd protect your privacy. You can say as much or as little as you want. But people are listening." After a long pause, Terrence said, "I'll think about it." He hung up, stood up from the couch, and walked out onto the apartment balcony. It was quiet out there, the hum of traffic blending into the distance. He leaned on the railing, staring out at nothing for a moment, then pulled out his phone. He scrolled through the messages he'd been avoiding. A few were from high school classmates. One was from an old co-worker who now lived in Cincinnati. And then there was one that stopped him cold. It was from Tiffany. "Hey, I'm sorry I didn't say anything that night. I wanted to. I just froze. I've been thinking about it non-stop. You didn't deserve that. I'm really sorry." He stared at her message for a while, then typed back, "I don't blame you. Nobody knew what to do. I barely did." The next morning, someone knocked on his door. Calvin opened it, half asleep. A woman stood in the hallway, wearing jeans and a black t-shirt that said, "Rock Hill Mutual Aid." She held a small paper bag in one hand and a clipboard in the other. "Hi," she said kindly. "Is Terrence home?" Calvin stepped aside. Yeah. One sec." Terrence came to the door slowly, unsure what to expect. "I'm Mariah," the woman said. "We're organizing community support for you. Some folks in the neighborhood wanted to drop off food and cards. Nothing fancy, just to show they care." She handed over the bag. Inside were handwritten notes, a couple gift cards, and a Tupperware container of banana bread. Terrence didn't know what to say. Mariah smiled. "You didn't ask for this, but it happened to you, and we think it matters." He nodded quietly. "Thank you." That evening, he walked outside for the first time in 2 days. A few neighbors recognized him. One man gave him a silent thumbs up. A woman from down the hall said, "We got your back, baby." He managed a small smile. "Thanks." Back in his apartment, Calvin raised an eyebrow. "You thinking about talking to that reporter now?" Terrence didn't answer right away. He walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and stared out the window. "I'm thinking it might help," he finally said. "Not just me, other people too, because the truth wasn't just caught on a camera. It was seen by eyes that hadn't forgotten. And now the question was what he'd do with it. Marlon didn't think he was walking into anything unusual that night. He'd been driving for Lyft since 2019. A quiet, even-tempered man in his late 40s, Marlon Reynolds had seen it all. Drunk passengers, lost phones, crying breakups in the back seat. But picking up Terrence Morris outside CVS was supposed to be just another quick ride on a Friday night. He remembered pulling in and seeing the lights first. Not the car lights. Police lights. Then he saw Terrence, standing in cuffs. At first, Marlon thought maybe there was some kind of mistake. Maybe Terrence was helping someone or involved in something completely unrelated. But as he rolled down his window and heard Terrence say, "That's me," it hit him hard. He knew this wasn't just about a ride anymore. Now, 3 days later, Marlon sat across from Terrence at a small booth in a diner off Saluda Street. The smell of hash browns filled the air. A waitress in green sneakers topped off their coffee without asking. "I keep replaying it," Marlon said, stirring his cup. "Like I should have said more. Should have gotten out of the car." Terrence shook his head. "You said what mattered. You said I was your pickup. You told them I worked there. That helped. Didn't stop them from cuffing you, though?" "No," Terrence said quietly. "It didn't." They sat in silence for a moment, the low hum of conversation around them blending with the clink of dishes. Marlon finally asked, "You talking to the media yet?" "Thinking about it," Terrence replied. "I've been getting messages left and right. It's weird. People I haven't talked to in years. Strangers. People are watching," Marlon said. "They need something to stand on. Something to hold up and say, 'This ain't right. You got caught in it. But maybe it means something.'" Terrence looked down at his hands. The red marks were fading now, but he still saw them every time he turned his wrists. "You know what messed with me most?" he said. "The way they didn't even look twice at the badge on my chest, or listen when I said I worked there. It's like None of it counted. Not my words, not my job, not me. Marlon nodded. They didn't see a worker. They saw a story they already had in their heads. Exactly. Marlon leaned back, folding his arms. But here's the thing. Now they don't get to control the story anymore. Terence exhaled slowly. That idea, the idea that he could take back some of the power in what happened, had been circling in his mind ever since the video went viral. He hadn't planned for any of this. He didn't ask to be a face of anything. But there he was, caught in a moment that people wouldn't let go of. And somewhere inside, he knew it was bigger than him now. Later that day, Jason Alvarez, the reporter from Charlotte, called again. "I'd like to meet in person, if you're open to it," Jason said over the phone. "No pressure, just a conversation. You tell me where, you set the terms." Terence agreed. They met at the public library. Neutral ground, quiet, with a side entrance far from the media circus growing around the CVS store. Jason brought one cameraman and a notebook. Nothing flashy. He listened more than he talked. Terence told him everything, from the end of his shift to the moment Marlon pulled up, to the quiet ride home where he stared out the window the whole way, wondering how it had all happened so fast. "You don't sound angry," Jason said at one point. "I am," Terence replied, "but not the kind you yell about. It's the kind that just sits with you. Makes you ask why people didn't even need a reason." Jason was quiet for a second. Then he said, "People will listen to that, the way you're saying it." The next evening, the interview aired. It wasn't long, maybe 3 minutes. But Terence's calm voice, his clear words, and the footage playing in the background made something click for a lot of people. Comments flooded in. Messages, too. From people who'd had similar run-ins, from others who were just stunned, and from those who said nothing like that had ever happened to them, but now they couldn't stop thinking about it. But while most people saw that 3-minute clip, something else was happening behind the scenes, something that would change the shape of Terence's next few weeks. The CVS store looked different now. Not physically, same beige paint, same faded parking space lines, but emotionally, it no longer felt like just a job site. It was a location now, a reference point in conversations Terence had never imagined himself part of. He hadn't gone back inside since that night, not even to grab the backpack he left in the break room. Mr. Denton had dropped it off at his apartment the next day, along with a quiet, "Take your time," and a small gift card from the store team. But Terence wasn't sure what time would fix. Every time he thought about returning, he remembered how his knees went weak when the cuffs clicked, how his voice trembled when he asked them to verify who he was, how they hadn't flinched, like his words didn't mean anything. He couldn't just go back and scan barcodes like nothing happened. The news story was still spreading. Some outlets played up the racial angle, others focused on police miscommunication. A few tried to soften it, calling it an incident rather than what it really was. A public mistake. But people saw the video. They saw the calm, the compliance, the uniform. They heard the officer say, "You match the description," and then fail to explain anything more. What stung most wasn't what was done. It was what wasn't. No apology, no acknowledgement, just silence. Even now, Officer Hollow and Officer Markley were still on active duty. The department had issued a generic statement. "We take all community concerns seriously and are conducting an internal review of the situation. At this time, both officers followed protocol based on the information provided." Protocol. That word followed Terence like smoke. He sat in his bedroom late one night, staring at the ceiling fan. Calvin had gone out to meet friends, but Terence hadn't been in the mood to socialize. His mind was too full. His phone buzzed. Another message. "My name is Faith. I work in HR in Colombia. My son is 25, and something similar happened to him 2 years ago. We didn't record it. We didn't know who to call. I'm glad you're speaking." Then another. "You don't know me, but thank you. You're reminding people that quiet doesn't mean guilty." These messages were coming in from people in completely different states, different ages, different races, and yet they shared something. The need to say, "I saw you. I heard what they did. It's not okay." Terence read them all. He didn't reply to most. Not because he didn't care, because he didn't know how to respond to kindness from strangers while still processing his own anger. Then an email came in from someone unexpected, a representative from the Rock Hill Police Department. "Mr. Morris, we understand you may be receiving a high volume of attention at this time. We'd like to schedule a meeting, if possible, to discuss the incident and listen to your concerns directly." Terence stared at the screen. Listen to your concerns, not apologize, not acknowledge wrongdoing. Just listen. He closed the laptop and walked into the kitchen. Poured a glass of orange juice. Stood at the window watching the parking lot across the street. The lights blurred against the glass. Somewhere, a siren echoed far away. He didn't feel free. He wasn't in handcuffs anymore, but they'd been replaced by something else. The knowledge that at any moment, to someone, he could still fit a description. That his explanations might not be enough. And yet, in all that tension, something had begun to shift. The woman from the diner, Mariah from Rock Hill Mutual Aid, had contacted him again. She was organizing a town hall event for residents to speak on community police relations. She asked if Terence would be willing to attend. "Not as a speaker," she said over the phone. "Just as a person who knows what it feels like." He didn't answer right away, but something in her voice sounded like real care. That evening, as he sat alone in the quiet of his apartment, Terence finally allowed himself to imagine something that hadn't felt possible before. That maybe, in a room full of strangers, he could say what he needed to say, and not be dismissed. But before that room, before that conversation, came something else. A call that would lead him down a path he hadn't even considered. One that would take his story far beyond Rock Hill. The call came from a New York area code, but the voice on the other end belonged to someone Terence never expected. "Terence, my name is Patrice Givens. I'm a producer with Real Voices, the digital docuseries on Channel 8 News. I just wanted to say first, I saw your story, and I think more people need to hear it." Terence was sitting on the edge of his bed, phone in one hand, towel over his shoulder, hair still wet from the shower. He hesitated. "I've talked to a few local reporters already." "I know," Patrice replied calmly. "But this would be different. Longer format. We don't do clickbait. We spend time. You'd have control over what you say. If you're open to it, we could fly down this weekend just to talk. No pressure." Terence wasn't sure what to say. A month ago, he was filling prescriptions and arguing with customers about cough syrup limits. Now, producers from national outlets were calling his personal phone. "I'll think about it," he said honestly. And he did. He thought about it that evening while watching coverage of the incident on YouTube. One video had over 1.2 million views. The comments section was a battlefield, half of them full of outrage, the others full of denial. "This is why body cams matter. He was just sitting. What description? Stop making everything about race. How is this even acceptable in 2025? He wasn't reading them for validation. He knew what happened. He lived it. But what stood out were the ones from people who never saw this kind of thing firsthand. People who admitted, "I didn't get it until now." That next morning, Patrice followed up with a short, respectful email. No pressure. Just a note that they'd be in Charlotte later that week for another story anyway, and she'd love to meet if he was open. Terence agreed. They met in a small studio 2 blocks from downtown. Just him, Patrice, a camera operator named Darnell, and a sound tech who barely spoke. Patrice didn't rush. She didn't jump into questions. She just sat with him for a while, asked about his life, not just the incident, but who he was before all of this. What made you want to work at CVS? What's a typical day like there? What do you love doing when you're not working? It felt less like an interview and more like a conversation with someone who actually cared about the answers. Then she asked gently, "When they cuffed you, what was the first thing that crossed your mind?" Terence thought for a long second that I didn't know what to say to make it stop. She didn't speak. Just let the silence stretch. Then he added, "You think you'll have the right words in moments like that. But when it happens, it's like you become invisible. Like your words don't land. You're just an image they're reacting to." Patrice nodded, not with pity, but with understanding. 2 weeks later, the episode aired. It didn't go viral. It exploded. People across the country watched as Terrence sat in that studio and explained, in clear and honest words, what it felt like to go from employee to suspect in less than 60 seconds. The most replayed moment was him saying, "I've never been arrested. I've never even been late to work. But that night, none of it mattered. I was just a body on a bench in a red shirt." That line hit home for people. Twitter blew up. Instagram Reels clipped the interview with captions like, "This is why we need better training." And he kept calm and still got cuffed. Terrence's inbox filled up with speaking requests, churches, universities, advocacy groups. Most of them just wanted to hear from him. Some wanted him to lead panels. A few offered money. But Terrence didn't feel like a speaker. He felt like a guy who had something terrible happen to him, and now the world expected him to do something with it. Calvin joked one night, "You gonna run for city council next?" Terrence laughed. Not even a little, but underneath the humor was a new awareness. People were listening. His name was being passed around. And if he didn't define what came next, someone else would. But just as Terrence was beginning to find his footing, someone unexpected reached out. Someone who had lived through something eerily similar, and saw in him not just a story, but a reflection. The email came with no fanfare, just a subject line that read, "I see you." At first, Terrence thought it was spam. But when he opened it, he saw the name at the bottom and froze. Anthony Reese. A civil rights attorney from Oakland, Anthony had been thrust into the public eye 3 years earlier after a video surfaced of him, then in a business suit, being forced face down on the sidewalk outside a hotel valet stand. He'd been waiting for his wife. The police said he looked nervous. That was their reason. It cost them a lawsuit. It cost him a piece of himself. Now here he was, reaching out. "I saw your interview. You said something I've never been able to explain myself. That feeling of becoming invisible right when you need to be most seen. You're not just telling your story, Terrence. You're making people stop and reconsider how they view strangers. I'd like to talk, if you're open to it," Terrence replied. They set up a call. They spoke for nearly 2 hours. About everything. About how a quiet moment could suddenly tip into a public spectacle. About how humiliation didn't end when the cuffs came off. About the guilt that comes from becoming a face for something you never signed up for. But most of all, they talked about what could be done. "You don't have to do this alone," Anthony said. "You don't have to figure it all out by yourself. You're already helping people just by telling the truth. But if you want to take it further, policy, training, youth work, I can put you in touch with folks who will actually listen." Terrence didn't commit, but he didn't shut it down either. That week, he attended the Rock Hill Community Town Hall. He wasn't scheduled to speak. He just wanted to be in the room. Listen. See who showed up? The room was packed. Church elders, teachers, high school kids in oversized hoodies, a nurse still in scrubs, the mayor's assistant, even Officer Hollow, standing stiffly in the back row. When the moderator opened the floor, hands shot up. Some people spoke softly. Others were angry. All of them had something to say. About being followed in stores. About their kids being stopped walking home from school. About what it means to be presumed suspicious before you've even said a word. Then, after nearly an hour, someone said, "Is Terrence Morris here?" All heads turned. Terrence stood up slowly. He didn't go to the mic. He just spoke from where he stood. "I didn't come to speak. I just wanted to hear what people had to say. But I'll say this. I never expected that sitting on a bench would be the reason I had to explain who I am. And I never thought being calm and cooperative would lead to cuffs. But it did." He paused, then added, "And I'm not here to play hero. I'm still figuring this out. I'm still mad, still tired. But I'm not gonna stay silent anymore." The room went quiet. Not out of shock, but respect. When the meeting ended, people came up to shake his hand, hug him, thank him. A teenage boy slipped him a note that said, "You made me feel brave." Outside, in the parking lot, Terrence ran into Hollow. The officer looked uncomfortable. He cleared his throat. I wanted to say, I saw the interview. I didn't expect you to handle things like that. Terence studied him. Like what? Just calm. Honest. Not out for blood. Terence's eyes narrowed slightly. Maybe I should have been. Hollow lowered his gaze. Maybe. That was all. Not an apology. Not really. But maybe the closest thing he was going to get. Later that night, Terence sat on his couch scrolling through his messages. One stood out. It was from a small community college in Alabama. The Student Activities Board was organizing a Justice and Identity Week and asked if he'd consider speaking, not as an activist, but just as someone who'd experienced the thing too many still don't believe happens. Terence stared at the message. He thought about the bench outside CVS, the way it felt cold under his legs that night, how simple everything had seemed just minutes before it all changed. He wrote back, "Yeah, I'll do it." Because maybe telling the story again and again wouldn't undo what happened, but it might make it harder for the next person's voice to be ignored. It wasn't long before Terence's story stopped being just a story. He spoke at that Alabama college, then a high school in Winston-Salem, then at a panel hosted by a public health nonprofit in Macon, Georgia. Each event was a little different, sometimes formal, sometimes intimate, sometimes messy. But what never changed was the way people leaned in when he spoke. No microphone tricks, no slogans, just a man telling the truth about how it feels to be seen as a threat while doing nothing but existing. He didn't call himself an activist. He didn't want the title. He still worked part-time at a smaller pharmacy across town. Low stress, no late shifts, no uniforms. Just something to keep him grounded. But his evenings were filled now with writing, with traveling, with listening to stories that sounded like his, and ones that didn't, but still hurt the same way. He started journaling again, something he hadn't done since high school. At first, it was just a way to clear his head, but soon those pages turned into a small online blog. Bench Hours. The name was simple, maybe too simple, but it fit. His first post read, "They cuffed me for sitting still. So now I'll speak while moving forward." People read it, shared it. Teachers used his posts in class discussions. A woman in Baltimore reached out and said her 8th grade students had each written letters to him. He read every single one. And then, one day, the unexpected happened. He got a call from a young officer in training. Her name was Aaliyah Benton, a cadet at a regional academy in Tennessee. "I watched your Channel 8 video as part of our ethics module," she said. Half the room cried. "I just wanted to say, I hear you, I see you, and I'm going to carry that with me when I'm out there." That moment hit him differently. Because it wasn't about followers, it wasn't about headlines. It was about one future officer deciding not to see someone as a threat just because they were quiet and waiting. Around that time, Terence received an invitation to speak at a training seminar for new police recruits in Athens, Georgia. It came from one of the training directors who'd seen him speak in Macon. "Honestly," the director said on the phone, "some of these cadets need to hear what you went through from your own mouth. Not a book or a PowerPoint." Terence hesitated. "You think they'll even listen to me?" "I can't promise you how they'll take it," the man replied. "But I promise they'll hear it. Sometimes that's enough to plant the seed." Terence accepted. He didn't come in angry. He didn't scold. He walked into the room in jeans and a hoodie and told them about the bench, about the cuffs, about how fast people stop being people when assumptions take over. Some cadets squirmed. Some took notes. One looked down the whole time, but when he finished, there was a long pause, and then a few clapped. Not out of politeness, but recognition. Later, a cadet approached him in the hallway. Nervous, fidgeting. "Mr. Morris, I just want to say I didn't get it before, but I think I needed to hear it from someone who's not yelling. Someone who's just telling it straight." Terence shook his hand. "Then maybe that bench wasn't wasted." By now, CVS had issued an internal policy update. Store managers were instructed to review protocols with local law enforcement about employee presence after hours. It was quiet, not flashy, buried in memos. But it mattered. Terence never got an apology from Officer Hollow or Markley. But he did get calls from city council members asking how they could support more community forums. He didn't want to be anyone's symbol, but maybe, just maybe, he could be a reminder. That silence doesn't mean guilt, that politeness doesn't protect, and that stories, when told truthfully, can reach farther than anger ever could. Because while the bench outside that CVS had only been meant for tired feet, it became the starting place for something else, a reason to speak when staying quiet used to feel safer. There was nothing remarkable about the bench. It wasn't fancy, just poured concrete with a few chips on the edge. Half shaded by the overhang of the CVS roof, next to a trash can and a vending machine that never quite worked. It wasn't a place people noticed, until someone sat on it and became a headline. Terence never asked for any of this. He never set out to be a public figure or someone people quoted in articles. He just wanted to get home after work. That's all. But life doesn't always ask for permission. Sometimes it just hands you a moment, and how you carry it decides what it becomes. The moment he was cuffed, Terence became a symbol to some, a threat to others, a flashpoint in another tired argument about policing, perception, and public silence. But as time passed, and he kept telling his story, not with a raised fist, but with a steady voice, something deeper happened. People started listening, not because he had perfect words, but because his experience rang true, because too many had been stopped, questioned, dismissed, for walking, for waiting, for wearing the wrong thing in the wrong neighborhood, because his calm didn't save him, because his job title didn't shield him, because the officers didn't even pause to wonder if he could have been telling the truth. That bench, in its ordinariness, became a place that changed lives. Not just Terence's, but the Lyft driver who saw it all, the cashier who froze, the bystander who filmed, the teachers who built lesson plans around it, and the cadets who now carry his words into their training shifts. And maybe that's the real story here. Not that something unjust happened, we already know that happens, but that someone chose to speak about it, not with bitterness, but with intention. Terence didn't say, "Look at me." He said, "Look at what happened." And then, let's talk about why. That's a different kind of strength. One we don't celebrate enough. It's easy to yell. It's harder to sit in the pain, tell the story straight, and let people see all the parts. The fear, the disbelief, the silence after the cuffs come off. But he did. And because he did, others started talking. Young men started sharing their own stories. Parents asked their kids different questions. A few officers, maybe just a handful, started looking at their assumptions a little more closely. Will that fix everything? No. But change doesn't always start with fireworks. Sometimes it starts on a bench, in the heat, with someone too tired to stand, and too honest to stay quiet. Terence still walks past that CVS sometimes. Not often, but sometimes. He doesn't sit there anymore. Not because he's afraid, but because he's standing somewhere else now. In schools, in meetings, on stages, reminding people that what they assume in 10 seconds can shape someone else's entire night or life. And maybe that's what we all need to remember. That people are more than a glance. That uniforms, whether blue or red, don't tell you someone's story. That truth can sound quiet and still carry power. So the next time you see someone sitting alone, waiting, doing nothing wrong, don't jump to conclusions. Ask. Listen. Sometimes the difference between dignity and disgrace is just one person who decides to treat someone else like a human being. If this story meant something to you, if it made you pause, made you think, then don't let it end here. Share it. Talk about it. And ask yourself, how would you want to be treated in that same moment? Because what happened to Terence wasn't just about him, it was about all of us, and the choice we make between judgment and understanding. Subscribe for more stories like this, the kind that don't just fill time, but fill space in your heart.